Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast, presented by SeatGeek. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. Erin Summers alongside Saints legend Luke McCown. We have enjoyed being here at the Combine all week. There are drills that started yesterday afternoon and continue over the weekend. Luke, what do you like about the Combine drills and getting to see the on-field workouts?
Well, I'm a football junkie, and so anytime I can watch these guys, I always say this, that I love watching talented people do their thing. Mm-hmm. That whether you're a musician or a painter or a basketball player or a golfer or a fisherman, whatever, if you're talented at something, I enjoy watching you excel at that.
Yeah.
All of these young men are extremely talented athletes. I said it the first day we were here, I enjoyed listening to them in their interviews. They're very polished. Certainly I hope that they've taken the time to invest in PR development. Mm-hmm. I know most of these bigger colleges especially have programs that help these young men learn how to answer questions, look people in the eye, be authentic in what you're saying. But I enjoyed that part of it because that's part of the process. It's part of watching these young men grow up right in front of your eyes and grow up really fast. I just had a conversation a little while ago this morning with Cam Ward's family. His dad and his sister, they're small East Texas from where an hour or so from where I'm from. And so just connecting, and his dad said, "What do you remember most about this process?" And I said, "I remember the people. I can remember coaches that I had interactions with and players that I had interactions with 20 years ago that maybe I got to play with or be on the same team with, and then lost touch for 2 or 3 or 4 years or 5 years or whatever. And then you come back here and it's just a collection of people doing their thing, and you run into people that you've created memories with 20 years ago because of the scouting combine. Chris Sims, I played with Chris. He and I spent 3 years together in Tampa Bay. And so saw him the first day here. Hadn't talked to Chris or seen him in 5-6 years probably. And so just getting to sit down and chat with him for a little while. And so you remember those things. But I enjoyed that part of this from my standpoint. And then just watching these guys go out and put it on the line on the field. We got to watch the D-line and the defensive ends do their thing yesterday. It was highly, highly impressive. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I'm not playing anymore. Those guys are way too fast now. But it's a lot of fun. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, so that coverage will continue over the weekend as the other position groups work through the on-field workouts, go through the drills, and that's available to see on NFL Network each afternoon starting at 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. And I always like watching the quarterbacks just throw.
Yeah, we're the best-looking guys.
I didn't even think about that. Of course you're going to take it there, though. No, it's always a good week, and it gives you a really good perspective on what's available, who's available, what to look forward to once the draft comes here. Going to be in Green Bay this year, coming up shortly, and the Saints have the 9th overall pick, so top 10 pick for the Saints, and then from there 8 other picks, so could be extremely active.
It's going to be fun, and we had Bucky Brooks on this morning, and I the consensus has been best player available. Mm-hmm. When you're sitting at 9 and it's not just a star-studded here's 50 blue chippers, but here's a bunch of really, really strong day one starters that you can't go wrong with whatever the best player on your board is at number 9. You'll be okay. We've talked about this. We've got a number of holes to address. Again, the depending on who you read, the needs are greater from one side of the ball to the other. But nonetheless, we've got things to figure out. Mickey gave a ringing endorsement for Derek Carr and at least trying to work that situation out contractually. Mm-hmm. That's probably the number one thing that needs to happen even prior to the draft, just so that what the needs are, because that affects free agency and the money that you can spend there. And so when you target people with money that you have in free agency, that affects how you approach the draft, because of people that you feel like you can get in free agency that maybe you won't have as high of a grade on in the draft. So a lot of moving parts. I'm a big proponent of best available at number 9.
Yeah.
Whether that's running back, defensive end, tight end, or big-time receiver.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun draft to follow, and we'll have you there, everything you need, NewOrleansSaints.com, the entire way. You mentioned Bucky Brooks. He was one of the people we did talk to today. He's NFL draft analyst, works for NFL.com a lot. He's here this week doing some coverage for NFL.com, their digital pregame shows. And then we talked to Matt Miller, who is the ESPN draft analyst, and he gave us some really good insight into what he expects the Saints to do, names to watch, and everything like that. So we're going to kick off these interviews with Bucky and then head into Matt. Friday here at the NFL Combine, right here on Radio Row. Erin Summers alongside Luke McCown and Bucky Brooks from NFL Network. You're a popular guy this week because you're the one that is ranking all these players. Every email that I get, it's like, well, Bucky likes this guy at this place. How is it for you?
It's different, right? Because this has become like a marquee event. Everyone loves the draft. Everyone loves kind of turning the calendar forward to think about which players are going to be the stars of tomorrow. So it's fun kind of speculating and projecting. It's fun catching up with like some of your old friends from the business.
Yep.
And then dealing with all the agents, and all the agents like, hey, do my guy solid. And I'm like, I don't really know who your guy is. But so there's a lot of that. But overall it's a fun time, because this is the only time that all the football people are in one location. So it's part big event in terms of the Combine, but it's really like a catch-up and a convention all in one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, talk about the uniqueness of the Combine and the setting that it provides. You were here some 30 years ago. I was here 20 years ago, 21 years ago. Talk about the uniqueness of how it's changed, how it's morphed into what it's become today.
Yeah, it's a big deal now. Back in the day, man, you talk about 30 years ago, it was like it was going to Neverland. You didn't know what you were walking into.
Right.
You didn't know the drills that you were doing. You didn't really understand the magnitude of the event back then, how important it was to your draft status and those things. But now, because NFL Network, has made it a TV show, everyone is prepared for all the things that they want to do. And so it's hard to surprise the players. If anything, the way evaluators look at players, if you don't perform well here, if you don't kind of know what's going on and you bomb.
What are you doing after the season?
Like what? Yeah. Like it speaks to your lack of preparation and those things. But I still think it's one of the best things to kind of be a part of, because you get a chance to see guys continue to take steps closer to their dreams.
Right. Well, let's jump right into your mock. You've got us taking Jalen Walker.
Okay. Yeah, Georgia.
From Georgia.
Versatile linebacker. So the thought is, when you think about Jalen Walker and the way the league is playing, we're seeing more teams try and use players like a Michael Parsons.
Yes.
Where they're the second-level hybrid. They can play linebacker. They can play edge rusher. They can I think the word that I've been hearing is points of entry when it comes to being able to rush the passer.
That's right.
Well, Jalen Walker is someone who can do that. You'll see him play off-ball linebacker at Georgia. You can see him come off the edge and have a sack presence. And when you think about the age of the Saints defense, you would like to think that, okay, we need to find some dynamic athletes that can play on that level. And also Brandon Staley coming over. He had a player in Derwin James who he used as a hybrid. He's used hybrid players before. So to me, it's kind of like a perfect fit.
Yeah, he used Khalil Mack in a very versatile role. He used Bosa in a very versatile role. And the majority of football now is played in 11 personnel, where you need a guy that can stand up and rush and drop out and cover, right? And so a guy that has experience playing outside backer, has experience with his hand in the dirt, rushing from the edge, it can be a valuable asset to
and also
defense.
when you're thinking about it, not necessarily that the Saints needed a culture change, but when you think about what you get from players coming from Georgia and how hard it is, and just the competitive nature that is created in that environment, you get a chance to bring that over. A lot of times when you're a new coach, you have a brand new coaching staff, you try and flip the culture internally. And sometimes you do it by your own presence and the new standards that you create, but a lot of times you do it with the people that you bring in.
Yeah, it's been interesting talking to Kellen Moore and even the front office. They are really big on the player interviews here this week and how that could affect their locker room. They want to find the right people to bring in. I think they're on the same page there, but with the new staff, how do you see what maybe we've traditionally seen from the Saints and how they draft changing?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because new head coach, new schemes, they have different demands in terms of the type of players they want, but the front office and the coach and the scouting staff remains the same. So how do they change their eye? How do they change what the preferences are? That takes a lot of dialogue and communication. Because Kellen was hired so late, obviously they won the Super Bowl when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're still probably having some of those conversations. So this is the first time that everyone has been able to get together and have meetings and talk about, hey, here's what we like at wide receiver. This is what we would like to have in a tight end and a running back, offensive line, all of those things. And as they continue to work through that, you'll see the board kind of shift and you hear different names kind of pop up associated with the Saints as they kind of settle in to the type of player they want to bring in.
Yeah, Jeff Ireland said that the way the defense is going to be, it opens up a lot of players for them on the board. There's more people they might be looking at.
Yeah, because with Brandon Staley is a disciple of Vic Fangio.
Yes.
And what he would like to do is kind of do some different things, play a little umbrella coverage over top, do some things when it comes to the front. You can play with some bigger guys, but some smaller guys. And really, when you go all the way back to when he was first coordinated with the L.A. Rams, they did play with a lot of smaller guys. And it does change what you can look for because whether we're talking about hybrids or the big bodies on the front point of attack, it's a lot easier to find little guys than big guys. And if you can find a way to play good defense with those, it does open up the board. Yeah,
talk about just the way that the influence of what the Eagles did in the Super Bowl, certainly defensively to a juggernaut of an offense, or what has been over the last couple of years, what they did defensively and how that's going to change everybody else's view of how to play defense in the NFL.
Well, I think it's not only necessarily what they did in the Super Bowl, but I would say it's the construction of the team.
Yeah.
If you look at how the Eagles they've gone to 2 Super Bowls in the last 4 years. They've done it while flipping their roster. They are a team that drafts early, a year or two early before they really need a player.
Yeah, that's a great point.
They always invest in the offensive and defensive lines, which gives them an opportunity to dominate. And if you hear them they say you only invest top picks in 2 types, in the trenches, offensive and defensive line, and guys that can score points.
Wow.
So if you think about guys that can score points, that'd be wide receivers and running backs.
Yep.
But it also would be like your guys in the trenches that can dominate an O-line, D-line. I think a lot of people will kind of look at how they've been able to build their team and how they're so young and so deep and so talented, and see if they can steal some of those ideas and use that blueprint.
Yeah, so what are some of the other holes that the Saints need to fill in this draft this year? You
know, the thing about the Saints, and I feel like they've said this for years, like the defense is an aging defense. They're long in the tooth at every level. And I love Cam Jordan, but at some point you got to have, like, the heir apparent, the next one to do it. Look, DeMario Davis, another one. Like, you got to have someone who can play the second, Tyrann Mathieu. So each of those 3 positions are positions that are core positions because you got to have a pass rusher. You need to have a traffic cop in the middle of the defense at the second level. And then you have to have a playmaking safety in this league to be able to get it done. I think those are holes that need to be addressed. But really, it's Kellen Moore comes over, you naturally want to put your hands on the offense and figure out, okay, can we solve this offensive line? I know they've kind of made a soft statement about Derek Carr and those things, but you got to get a quarterback of the future in the building if you don't believe that Spencer Rattler or one of the other guys is that guy. So to me, I think it really is a best player available draft for the Saints. They can take just the best player in every round and live with it because I don't think it's necessarily a needs-based draft. It's, hey, let's upgrade the talent on the roster. We'll figure out how to play with them.
100%.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to GM Mickey Loomis. He said that we may keep all 9 of our picks this year and really load up on some young talent.
Yeah, look, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. At the end of the day, and look, this roster is deep when it comes to like trench warriors and those things. It's not as deep at wide receiver. There's some solid talent at defensive back and in running back. I think what you want to do is you want to be selective with the players that you're bringing in. You want to make sure you nail it with good players, regardless of position. The only way to build a championship caliber team is you got to load it with really good players. And as much as you want to kind of address needs, you still want to make sure that the players are blue chip players because the teams that win at a championship level tend to have 8 to 12 blue chip players,
That's right.
meaning guys
100%.
that you eventually can see or envision being Pro Bowl caliber players. If you get those kind of players on your team, you can figure out how to do it.
100%. On the offensive side, who should the Saints target?
Well, it depends. Like I wouldn't see an offensive player early, but I do think, what I'm saying, when we're talking about addressing the wide receiver position, you can go and add more weapons there. The thing about the wide receiver position, like you have good players, but I can't say that this is like a star-laden draft. So you talk about the guy before we got on air, Isaiah Bond.
Yeah.
He can be a really good player, but he's like a second or third round player.
Yep.
Matthew Golden, I would say, is like a second round player. So you want to identify those kind of guys that can come in and make it happen. I would say like tight end. Like to me, I think the board is wide open for the Saints to do whatever they want. Tight end, running back, wide receiver. I know Alvin Kamara is coming back, but at some point you got to get the next great one. And this is a year where in the second or third round you can get a great running back.
Absolutely.
You take a look back, kind of a big picture, not just on the Saints, but the way that the draft may play out. You think we're going to see a lot of surprises or a lot of movement?
The thing is, there's always a surprise on the first day when it comes to the quarterback situation. As much as everyone has kind of poo-pooed on the quarterback class, and it's not like what last year's class. I remember last year, people didn't think last year's class was great, and then Bo Nix emerged as a player in the year, and then was like, oh, that class was great. Yeah, but we didn't talk about Bo Nix. And then I remember the outrage when Sean Payton took Bo Nix at 12. To me, it's similar in terms of everyone knows Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward will probably be the first two off the board in whatever order. But now it's identifying the third one. Is it Jackson Dart? Is it Jalen Milroe? Do Will Howard and Cal McCord get into that mix? And then if they do get into that conversation, is that a first-round conversation or a second-round conversation?
Right.
All of those things kind of factor in, but it's a hard position to evaluate. The only thing you can do is keep taking swings at the position and hope that it lands.
That's right.
But when you looked at the playoffs, I think 7 of the 8 that were in like the quarterfinals, they were first-round picks.
First-round picks.
So you have to expend the money. Now the thing is, the pick has to match the performance and the production of the player. So you can't stretch it, but you have to find a player that you deem worthy of being a first-round pick, and then you got to take it.
Yeah, and in today's day and age, with the salary structures for rookie players the way that it is now, it gives you a little more leeway in taking a young player early. We used to say it's going to set you back 2, 3, 4 years if you take a quarterback in the top 10 and you miss. And it's not necessarily the case anymore because of the salary structure for rookie players.
Yeah, you should be bold. And the thing that you would like to have is everyone on the same page. Ownership, everyone within the building, but also your fans understand that we're going to take swings and misses at quarterbacks. We're going to step to the plate, and we're going to keep cycling them through. So let's not overreact if we put the quarterback out there and he's not good. Like you think about the roller coaster, the carousel that the Saints had last year with Spencer Rattler. Was it Jake Havener playing?
Havener,
They're going back and forth, and everyone's outraged. I'm like, well, hold on. Spencer Rattler's a fifth-round pick. Like, the expectation shouldn't be that he's going to come and have it all solved. But once you draft a quarterback, whenever we say it, no matter what we say, hey, he needs time, when we put him on the field, the expectation is that he's going to be a Super Bowl quarterback.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, free agency-wise, do you think that there are a lot of people that you could get better with? Because I've heard that they feel like it's kind of a weak free agency class as well.
It is in terms of like the O-line, right? There's no one that you can expect to be a guy that's going to come in. When Kansas City locked up Trey Smith and said they were going to put him on a franchise tag, that kind of took the marquee trench player off the board. I mean, they're talking about Cam Robinson being available, but Cam Robinson was traded last year in the middle of the season from Jacksonville to Minnesota. Like, it's hard to think that, now we're going to go and back up the Brinks truck and give him a load of cash. It's tough because the quarterback market is going to dictate some of the free agent market and which guys go and how they play musical chairs there. But really, there aren't many, like, blue-chip names that are going to hit the open market, and that's kind of the way it should be. Your best players shouldn't hit the market. You should pay to do that. And so that's why you hear all these team builders talk about draft and developing is the best way to do it, because you can't predict which kind of blue chip players are going to shake free when it comes to free agency.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's your favorite drill here to watch?
Favorite drill? I think everyone likes the 40 because it's more like a track meet. For me, as a young scout, they always talked about, hey, look at the jumps, because even though we can't, like you sit in the stands, you can see them from afar. But the jump should correlate with the 40 time.
That's right.
So guys that run fast should jump high and jump far. So a guy that's going to run in the 4.4 range, his vertical should be high 30s or 40.
Yeah.
And if it's not like that, then it becomes an issue like, well, wait a minute, like that doesn't make sense. So I like looking at those drills. And then some of the position-specific drills, like with the DBs, like how they flip and turn, how they do those things. I think at the wide receiver position, it's really hard because you know it as a quarterback, you're throwing to guys that you don't know. Everyone runs a curl route differently. Everyone expects the ball to be there. But there is something to watching how guys naturally catch the ball because we talk about wide receivers running fast and those things, but Hall of Fame executive Bill Polian used to talk about, can they catch? And it's one of those underrated things when you're looking at guys like, can they legitimately just catch the ball? Like, do they catch it properly with their hands or do they have a tough time with it? Because if they struggle here, more than likely they're going to continue to struggle because it's something that should be very natural. And if it's an unnatural deal, it's really hard to improve upon this skill.
Yeah.
Love watching these young men come out and compete. And I was a fourth-round pick coming out of Louisiana Tech. I couldn't wait to get here and stand beside.
I could tell that you were from Louisiana at all.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm from East Texas.
Can you edit the country out
of
my
no, please edit the country out.
It's just funny.
It's all good. But I couldn't wait to stand on the field with the Ben Roethlisbergers and the Eli Mannings and show them what I got. Like that. And so what's your take on guys that come here and decide not to participate?
So it's hard because I can see it from both perspectives.
Yeah.
I can see it from a player standpoint where you're like, especially if you played a long time, you're like a fourth-year player, you played 50 games, you're like, hey, man, you've seen all the tape.
Yeah.
Like, there's not much more that I can do it. And it's the horror stories of someone getting hurt.
Yes.
So I always worry about that part of it. But then the other part, from a scouting standpoint, when you have like depth at a certain position, you want to see those guys go back to back. And I want to see the best guys perform back to back to back, and if they feed off of one another and who rises to the challenge, who falls by the wayside. Because some of the pressure that we try to create here, manufacture here, is supposed to give us an idea on what you're going to be like as a pro. So can you perform your best in adverse situations? Because everyone knows this is not ideal. You're not sleeping much. You're all over town. You're doing a bunch of things that are uncommon. You're probably going to have a better performance in your pro day, but are you willing to kind of grind it out and give us just the best that you have on that day?
How do you handle the stress of it?
Yeah. Because that's really what it is, because it is how are you when you're not at your best? Well, if I can get a gauge of where you are when you're not at your best, I can probably feel really good about you when you really have it together.
That's right.
Did y'all go through interviews with teams when you were here?
Yeah, we did that. Now it was in the train. They used to have like the old
train
hotel,
station.
The train station.
Yeah.
And then they had the main thing. And so over at the train station were the informal interviews where everyone is just grabbing you and making you sit down and you got to talk to everyone. And it's not a time limit.
No.
Like they can just hold you and talk to you. And then you had the formal interviews that were like 15 minutes or whatever. But I just remember it was just chaotic. It was a lot of talking, a lot of conversation. And back then, thankfully, before like now HR is tuned in, like the questions were random as all get out. They could be anything. Yeah, it's now.
Remember?
I mean, they would just ask you all kinds of stuff. Are you, if you could be an animal, are you a cat or a dog? Like stupid stuff. Like they've gone away from like those kinds of questions, and a lot of people now in those 15 minutes they make it really just about ball. Like when you step into the room, they pop on the tape, and it is all about ball. Because when you really think about the process, you're only with the guys a handful of times, and it doesn't even amount to maybe 48 hours total. You're there on a school visit where the area scout may talk to him, may not. You bring him in for a top 30 visit. You meet with him here at the combine, and then a random occurrence via Zoom. That's all you know. And so you're making multi-million-dollar decisions without really knowing the kid. So it's a lot to assess. It's a lot to try and figure out when you're projecting how a guy not only is going to play, but how he's going to fit into your locker room.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. I got drafted by Cleveland, but the worst meeting that I had was with the Cleveland Browns, and they were notorious for taking you to the back room. They had like a suite and then another door, and you go to the back room, and there's the head coach and the GM, and then a sports psych, like heat lamp and everything, like right here. It's like
so you sweat a little bit.
Oh man, stressing you.
Well, I mean,
and so Butch Davis recruited me to University of Miami out of high school. I ended up going to little old Louisiana Tech. Right, very first question. why'd you choose Louisiana Tech over Miami? Golly, man, that's put me on the spot. But
the heat lamp.
The heat
Yeah,
lamp.
we want to see if you're sweating.
Yeah.
There's some stories where we can't disclose the names, but where guys have taken prospects on the golf course.
Oh, yeah.
And golfed rounds with them because, your golf, like getting tee box. That first tee box is nerve-wracking for everybody, but can you keep your stuff together when it's pressurized when you're playing with those things? So there are little things that you do to kind of see how guys react, but this has really become a very sterile environment when it comes to those things. They try and keep it as much about ball as possible unless you have egregious character concerns.
Yeah, sure.
You try not to waste a lot of time dealing with that part and more so about who the person is and how are we going to get you to play your best ball at the next level.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, appreciate it.
That's cool.
Insight. Love it. Always to have you here. It was great having you in New Orleans recently for the HBCU Legacy Bowl as well.
That was fun.
Yeah.
That was fun. Right at the beginning of Mardi Gras. That was
super
a lot.
important, right? Super important.
I mean, it was. But Mardi Gras was a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot going on. It was a lot going on at one time.
Yeah.
I don't know if they should schedule it. There was a lot going on to manage, but it was fun.
You weren't out there in the parades?
You didn't see me on the floor? you didn't see me on the floor?
You
I was
home
there.
with a lot of beads?
Yeah, a lot of beads.
A lot of beads.
I got a friend I walked away with a lot of beads.
All right. Well, good for you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Here at the NFL Combine, Erin Summers alongside Saints legend Luke McCown and Matt Miller from ESPN. You have covered all things this upcoming draft. So I need to know, is this week the Super Bowl for you, or is it the actual draft?
The actual draft is the Super Bowl because that's fun. This is like tax time for an accountant. It's stressful. There's a lot going on. You're trying to make sure you don't forget anything, or you talk to a team and you don't say a player's name wrong or something. So this is a stressful week. The workouts are fun. Once we get to the actual workouts, you kind of get to kick your feet up, and that's we just get to geek out and watch football at that point. The media stuff is a blast. I love getting to talk to different fan bases and different people, but it's just a little bit stressful.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Hey, so number 9 and number 40, we want to jump right in.
Yeah.
Your 2-round mock for the New Orleans Saints.
If I did do it today, gosh, the Saints are the hard team for me. I'm going to be honest, because you could go anywhere at 9.
Yeah.
So I tend to go Jalen Walker, Georgia, because I think when you have a team that has needs in so many different spots, it's let's just get impact players. Let's get a guy that can be a difference maker, a tone setter. He's played linebacker. He's played edge rusher. I say you just let him pin his ears back and go get the quarterback.
Yeah.
I know he's a little bit undersized at 230, 245 pounds, but, man, every time I watched Georgia play, he was the best player on the field.
And a guy that can assimilate into a Brandon Staley defense that goes from 3-4 to 4-3, and he's dabbled in both. Maybe a guy that can do multiple things in that defense.
Yeah, and we saw that some when Staley was with the Chargers. He would have guys who fit that mold of sometimes you're standing up, sometimes you're stacking as a linebacker, sometimes you're just putting your hand in the dirt and going and getting it. So I would love Jalen Walker if he's there at 9. At 40, I think you go out the other side. I think you got to get wide receivers, playmakers on that side of the ball, especially with the future uncertain about Chris Olave.
Sure.
I think you have to be looking at those wideouts. This is a good year to take a wideout in that range.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see many come off the board in the top 20 picks. Maybe just Travis Hunter.
Yep.
So when you get back to 40, it's okay, is Matthew Golden from Texas there? That's kind of, I think his range is in that area. Is someone like Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, who is a little bit more physical, 6'3", 215 pounds. Even the tight end position, Mason Taylor. If Mason Taylor's there at 40, I'm all over that, right?
Yeah,
because
LSU
they need that someone that can just be that difference maker on offense. We know Kamara's great. Derek Carr's going to be back at quarterback. Let's give him some help. Let's give him some weapons.
Yeah, so what about a Tet McMillan?
So I'm torn on Tet, and I never want to talk badly about a prospect. I have some concerns about his ability to separate over the top.
Okay.
He's 6'5".
Yeah.
He can win at the catch point. I think he's quicker than fast, and you see that sometimes. He'll take a hitch route and he'll make a guy miss, but then he's getting caught from behind.
Right.
And a lot of contested catches where he doesn't separate down the field. So I think, red area, he's going to be a big impact because he's going to be able to just out-jump guys and make a play for the ball. I don't see the Drake London comps necessarily just because I don't know that he has that juice to pull away from guys.
Yep.
You mentioned Travis Hunter, and you mentioned him as a wide receiver. Obviously, he's taken interviews as a corner. He was here today as a DB. How do you see him?
Man, he can do whatever he wants to do. For me, if I was running a team and he said, "Hey, I only want to play corner," okay, do it. If he only want to play receiver, That's fine. I think he's better as a receiver than he is a corner. And I watched him play in person this year, and like he's not the biggest guy. You know, he's 6'1", 185. I worry about corners. We were just talking about Ted McMillan and Drake London. I worry about him at 185. I'm going to come downhill and tackle those guys consistently. We saw it in 2023. He missed 3 games with a lacerated liver because he took a really hard hit on the sideline. He's not this big. He's not Patrick Surtain out there. You know, he's a smaller guy. So I would rather him have the ball and evade tacklers than be the guy who has to go tackle those. Like DK Metcalf outweighs him by like 30 pounds. We don't really need him trying to make tackles. I think he's a playmaker. I would personally try to sway him. And here's what I would tell him. Wide receivers make about $25 million a year. Corners make about 15. It's an easy decision. And you don't have to tackle anyone playing wide receiver.
So that you don't see any opportunity for him to play both ways.
I think he'll do it. Yeah. And I mean, you've played in the NFL. You know how hard that is to play one position. Yeah. But he's done it. I think the biggest thing will be can he handle the workload mentally on both sides? To be in meetings, how do you handle that? And I know from Colorado, he would go to corner meetings. That was his primary position. Yep. And then they would have a package for him at wide receiver, basically. He's a 4.0 student. He's whip smart, so there's no lack of ability there, but it's just from a time management. Can he handle learning both positions? I would worry about the development. Can you develop effectively at 2 positions, or are you holding yourself back from becoming a great player at one position? Are you sacrificing that to be good at 2?
Not everybody can be Taysom Hill and be in 5 different position group meetings every day.
Yeah, correct. And Taysom, even within those, he had very specific roles to play in those meetings. So he would be in meetings, and Taysom was after my time, but he would be in meetings only for the time that they were talking about his role, his plays, right? And then he would get up and go to the other tool meeting, if you will.
Sure.
So it's different in that aspect. But to Matt's point, like imagine trying to come down and tackle Derrick Henry at 184 pounds or whatever it is. Yeah. Like it's just. I don't see that being able to translate with the load and the amount of game planning that goes in. It's just a different level of game planning than it even is from the college game. So I don't see it happening.
Yeah. It's going to be fun to watch, like to see him make a go at it. And I know he said it today. He wants both. They asked him if he returned kicks. He said, I already have 2 jobs. I don't need 3. But, I would put him at wide receiver and tell him he's our punt returner.
Yeah,
that's what I would do. For sure. Those are your 2 jobs. Stop trying to tackle people.
Corner is a position that's also come up for the Saints in this draft, and they do have Paulson Adebo, who potentially go into free agency here, is a free agent come in the next couple weeks. And then you have Alontae Taylor, who has moved inside, outside throughout the season, and then Kool-Aid McKinstry. But do you think the Saints need to look at adding another corner?
If you lose Paulson, yes. Yeah. I think that's the short answer. And at 9, there might not be one true corner having come off the board. I'm a big Will Johnson fan, and I know he's had the foot injury, the turf toe, so he hasn't played a whole lot recently, but I'm still a fan of his. He's my number 3 overall player. I still think he's great. And he played 2 games this year. He had 2 pick sixes. I mean, he's built. He's 6'2", 200 pounds.
He's a big guy.
Yeah, he is. And folks will get on about, he made some business decisions as a tackler. Every cornerback ever does, right? Like I grew up watching Deion Sanders make business decisions at corner. The guy's the greatest to ever do it. So I don't worry about that too much. He is a ball hawk, and he erases his side of the field. So if you could, I loved Kool-Aid last year. If you could have a Will Johnson and Kool-Aid as your corner duo for the next 4 or 5 years, like that's a pretty dang strong secondary.
Yeah. So a couple of other mocks have safety at number 9. Yeah. Talking about the young man from Georgia, Malachi Starks. What do you see there?
That's early for me. 9 would be early. I actually have a round 2 grade on Starks. I thought he had a down year compared to 2023. He had to play a little bit out of position this year. I think he's more of a nickel than he is a true free safety. Okay. I think he plays in that like Buda Baker role. That's where you would want him kind of hanging out more near the line of scrimmage. I think he struggled at times playing deep safety just because he didn't have that speed to close on the ball. I think both Texas games kind of highlighted that where he got beat deep a little bit. So 9 would be early. Now 40, if he's there, like that's a different conversation. Sure. And interestingly enough, a lot of those nickel-type safety guys have fallen in the draft. Brian Branch fell. Buda Baker fell. Antoine Winfield Jr. fell. So if he slips, I think 40 is a much better value.
Love it.
How much do you value them participating in the drills that are about to happen?
Yeah, like I want everyone to compete.
Yeah.
By April 24th, I'll forget who did and didn't. I think, it's like I'm not going to knock a guy for not competing because we don't always know what's going on, especially now with the college football playoff doesn't end until February, it feels like. So it's like, especially those 4 teams that had the late run, they're 8 weeks behind in their combine prep.
Yeah.
So you can't really get on a guy if you played at Ohio State or Notre Dame, it feels like your season just ended, and now we want you to run the most important 40-yard dash of your life. Like you kind of understand those guys wanting to hit Pauls and do it at their pro day.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Saints fans want to know about Spencer Rattler entering year 2 and what that looks like. Obviously, there's questions surrounding the contract and all the things with Derek Carr. Mickey sounded very convincing yesterday with his endorsement of what they're trying to do with Carr to keep him there. Let's talk about Spencer Rattler and what he needs to show stepping into year 2.
My evaluation on him coming out of college even was he just needs to be consistent. You'll watch him make a handful of plays and you'll think, oh my goodness, this guy's he's got it.
Yeah.
He's a playmaker. He can move around. He's got a big arm, especially for being a little guy. He's got a big arm, and he sees the field well. But he's just got to do it consistently. And I think you want to rein him in a little bit almost, to where he's not taking some of the chances that he made in college, especially. But I would be excited about the development of him. That developing quarterbacks has kind of died in the NFL. It just doesn't really happen anymore. So I think when you have a guy that has some of those tools and traits, let's see what he can become, especially now with, with Kellen there, someone who has that experience playing quarterback. He's been influential in developing some quarterbacks. What he just did in Philadelphia with a quarterback that can move around and Jalen Hurts. Jalen and Spencer are very, very different builds even. But a quarterback that can move around and make some plays, I would be fascinated to see how Rattler develops under Kellen.
So, speaking of Jalen Hurts, let's talk about Jalen Milroe, who I think is the perfect comp to Jalen Hurts. Mm-hmm. Not the most polished passer coming out of college, right? Highly athletic, incredibly intelligent, can do exactly what Kellen Moore would like to do.
No, that's the dream for Jalen Milroe is that you become Jalen Hurts. I've been asked about that a couple times in the last month. I think with Jalen Hurts, what helped him more than anything was Lincoln Riley. They completely changed his passing mechanics. They loosened him up. If you remember at Alabama, he was so stiff and robotic, and everything looked like he was thinking about it. Well, he gets to Oklahoma, and it's completely changed. He's loosened up. His accuracy got better. I think Milroe needs his version of Lincoln Riley, and that might be Kellen Moore. Somebody who can say, let's build you from the ground up. And you know this better than me. You should be talking about this. Like the footwork and everything.
Absolutely.
There's so much disconnect in his game. He just needs that time and someone that he trusts to say, let's rebuild you. Let's start at the base. Because, like you said, he might run a 4.3 here. He's a fantastic athlete.
Yep.
And I think if you draft him, just like they did with Jalen Hurts in Philly, you want to have a package for him early. Let's get this guy on the field because he is such a difference maker with the ball in his hands. And we saw it at Alabama, but he's really interesting because, he regressed as a passer this year.
Yeah,
you just saw it kind of fall apart. And so I think that's where these interviews are going to be huge for him is teams being able to find out, hey, what happened? Early in the year, you were on fire, and you actually the arm got worse throughout the season.
Yeah.
So what happened there, and how do we get you back? Yep, exactly.
With the way that this draft is, do you think there are going to be any surprises in the top few picks?
I think this year we might get more surprises because, if Luke and I did draft boards together, in most years they're going to be kind of similar. The top 15 guys are the top 15 guys. Mm-hmm. This year is going to be completely different because there's just huge disparity in the top 15, definitely in the first round. So I think we'll get some surprises. I have nightmares about this happening, about a player getting picked, and I'm like, wait, what? Who got picked? But, Michael Penix at 8 last year was this monster
I called that
surprise.
one, by the way.
You called that one?
I said somebody's going to take him inside the 10.
Yep. So maybe it wasn't a surprise to him. It was, but on draft night, there's always going to be something shocking that happens, and it is literally our worst nightmare. Okay, let's be prepared for everything just in case.
How much do you sit there and check off your mocks?
Oh yeah, no one will. I'll probably be the only one that would admit to you that we do it, but yeah you want to know, and I don't compete with my colleagues and stuff, but my buddies will be watching the draft, texting me like, "You got that one wrong. You got that one wrong." And it's like, okay, this is a hard job. You know, we're trying to project like what 500 players are going to do, and 32 teams are going to do 7 times. So, but yeah, I mean, we're aware of it for sure.
So who's that under the radar player, small school, maybe small conference, that's going to surprise people here at the Combine?
I mean, you guys might be aware of Grace Abel from North Dakota State, but I think he's a first-round pick, and that might be the surprise. You know, he had a great Senior Bowl week. Someone that could surprise here. Gosh, I think because of like social media, we're almost immune to surprises now.
Right.
You know, because like everybody's got a highlight reel.
Sure.
There's always, but I think Bashal Tutin, the running back from Virginia Tech, is going to do really well. He's gonna test exceptionally well. And in this running back class, he gets forgotten about. Right. But I think he would be the guy. And I know Tech isn't a small school, but we all know like there's 5 or 6 great running backs in this class. I think he's been forgotten about to some degree, and he could really shine here.
Awesome.
Dolan Holker was somebody that obviously stood out last year because of the catches, multiple, that he made, and he's with the
awareness, to make the catch. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by and chatting with us today.
Always happy to. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Luke. I appreciate you being here all week and sharing the show with me, giving us all of your insight as well.
This has been a ton of fun. Walk down memory lane, although memory lane didn't look like this 21 years ago. But it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, well, we might just tap into you and your knowledge again in the future. So be ready.
Anytime.
Great. All right, thank you so much. And as always, you can find us wherever you get your podcast, at New Orleans Saints Podcast or on NewOrleansSaints.com.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints Podcast, presented by SeatGeek. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints Podcast, presented by SeatGeek.